Good afternoon. Still, I am Piero Paris, and we have to start the last session of the day. Topic number 4: agroforestry, economy and policy of agroforestry. And this session was supposed to be chaired by Antonio Brunori. He's from Italy. He's a colleague of mine. But unfortunately, yesterday he phoned to us and he has the COVID. Just yesterday he discovered that for the second time since the beginning of the pandemic, unfortunately. So he asked me to chair this session. So we are in this session lasting 1 hour. We have 4 presentations with Cory Whitney, Elena Tavernier, Enrique Santos, and Nicolas Reotter. There are 2 presentations from Germany, one from Belgium, and one from Portugal. Are the speakers here? Okay. Okay. And okay, you're Elena. I'm Cory. Okay, perfect. Okay. Santos. Okay, there is Enrique is Santos. Leonardo. Okay, perfect. So, Cory, please introduce yourself. Sorry, I didn't have very much time to prepare this session, so I'm just doing as much as possible for sharing the session.
Oh, here it is. Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Cory Whitney, and I'll be talking to you today about a project on behalf of my colleagues, Frederick Kuhl, Katja Schiffers, and Eike Ludeling. Hi to the Unibond people who are here. I'm going to talk about ways, so it's now for something completely different in a way. I'm going to talk about ways that we can apply the kinds of knowledge that we've been talking about, possibly maybe a roadmap. So I'll talk about assessing agroforestry options for sustainable land use in Germany, give you a case study. So I'm going to talk about some of the challenges, the reasons that we do the kind of research that we do, and what motivates the whole process here. I'll talk about some perspectives, thinking about synergies and trade-offs when we consider these big picture issues and how we try to address that with agroforestry and different modeling approaches. I'll give you some insights into the kind of projects that we do. I'll give you a story of just an anecdote of one particular project. And I'll talk a little bit about maybe the future of research that we do in agroforestry for applying something in the real world, for making real world impact. So let's zoom really far out at first. So this picture was taken in the 70s by astronauts, NASA astronauts, and they gave us a big perspective, a big picture perspective that we're on this little blue rock flying through the vast black emptiness of space, and there's life here and it's worth preserving. Gave the environmental movement a big push. Since then, the population has more than doubled and it's set to grow pretty incredibly, and this of course means that there are lots of people to provide nutrition for. Providing that nutrition has been a major driver of the loss of biodiversity. We're seeing more and more loss as time goes by, so that's something we need to be considered about, one of the major challenges. And as we attempt to produce food, as we attempt to provide nutrition for all those people, we're faced with climate change impacts. So there's potential losses of crops. We're experiencing those already. And in the future, it's expected to get even worse, major losses of crop production due to climate change. So how can we address this? Luckily, we've come up with a big plan, the Sustainable Development Goals, and agroforestry is one of these methods, as we all know, as we're all here discussing, one of these methods that could be quite effective in helping us to have a sustainable agricultural production in the future. So agroforestry, just to recap, is a good sustainable solution because it allows us to maintain resources, to provide adequate production for now and for future generations, to prevent environmental damage, and to benefit farmers and society in whichever way is meaningful for them: cultural, aesthetic, nutrition, economic, etc. So how can we realistically address these complex systems, and how can we make realistic recommendations for interventions, and how can we help all of this to have a real world impact? We propose something called decision analysis. You've heard our talks in the past here at the EURAF last year and the year before, and you know that we are promoting these kinds of holistic transdisciplinary modeling approaches. Decision analysis is a way for us to build causal models. So this is really one of the major engines behind the decision analysis approach of complex systems. We recognize what we already know, so that means we make use of existing data sets, possibly papers, etc., all of the available information, but moreover, and possibly more importantly, we make use of experts. And when I say experts, I mean people who know about the system that we're interested in addressing. So that can be, it's often farmers. They have a lot of information. We can use that. We use these two main inputs to create forecasts. So we build simulations, create forecasts of system outcomes, and necessarily without perfect information. So we're working with uncertainty in all these cases. We try to identify knowledge gaps. There are two little question marks there. You can't see them, but we identify the knowledge gaps by doing some value of information analysis. And we honestly communicate uncertainties. So we're dealing with uncertainties. Our model is fed with uncertainties, and we're communicating about our results in terms of probabilistic distributions of possible outcomes related to intended impacts. So we think really in terms of impact. Impact pathways are a big part of our process. And so as an example of a project we worked on near where we are in Germany, Woodify is a company that works to reforest damaged woodlands. And they bought a chunk of a farm. They bought a chunk of farmland. And actually the rules for how that farmland could be managed didn't allow for forest, but they did allow for agroforestry. So they contacted us. We had a number of graduate students working on this over the last while, and we worked together with Woodify, with local farmers, to try to identify a meaningful impact pathway. What are the outcomes of interest of the intervention, and what are the decision options? And we formulated this over a number of workshops and iteratively meeting with farmers, meeting with experts to try to update this. This is just a pretty wide view of the whole thing. It's not a very detailed impact pathway, but just to give you a general sense. The impact pathway is meant to be the engine for simulating these different agroforestry interventions. So it's based on combinations of hay, hazelnuts, chickens, different types of woody trees, and truffles. And in comparison to the current use of the land, which is grains, rotations of grains, like wheat and barley. So again, those agroforestry interventions are hay, hazelnut, chicken, timber, and truffle. And the baseline that we're comparing these to is cereal crops. So we built several different simulations to compare. And the model, as I said, is based on uncertainties. It's fed with distributions of uncertainty about the kinds of interactions and about the variable values for those models. So we produce a distribution that represents a net present value, represents those values that we talked about, you saw in the previous moment. And what's interesting here in these, what you see here, I don't know if you can see my mouse. Anyway, what you're seeing here on the left are these net present value distributions. And what's interesting, of course, the big question, this is the difference again between the status quo, maintaining cereal crops, and introducing these agroforestry systems. And what's interesting in these distributions is really the question as to how likely it is that we end up on the other side of zero, right? That's a loss. So what's the chance that it seems to be quite small, but can we do any better? Can we make more measurements? Can we do more assessments? Can we better understand the likelihood of ending up in the negative there? And it turns out we may be able to do that if we have more information. So this is this value of information procedure. If we have more information about the marketability, the yield and the market value of these major crops from those systems. So hazelnuts, where there are no truffles, and truffles where truffles are meant to be growing with these hazelnuts. So what we're really promoting here, I think, decision analysis is a way to use probabilistic and holistic modeling procedures to address real-world decision-making in agroforestry. But one important aspect of this is this transdisciplinary approach, the idea that we can work with people who are affected by or people who are trying to make decisions. This is something we've been advocating for. We've published a number of papers talking about our transdisciplinary approaches and trying to promote more of those. So I talked to you about some of the major challenges and zoomed out to think about why it is that we're doing this kind of research. Talked a little bit about the different perspectives that are interesting here for the kinds of modeling approaches we're promoting. I gave you some insight into the kind of projects that we do and gave you one project in particular to think about. And hopefully added some kind of inspiration for applying transdisciplinary methods and helped you to think about some different transdisciplinary approaches that might be applied in your work even. Yeah, so I'm Corey Whitney. You can contact me or find me for any questions. Those are my co-authors, some of whom are here. And you will be hearing actually from Ike Ludling tomorrow afternoon on a related topic. So we'll have more follow-up then. Thanks.
Thank you, Corey. In perfect time. Congratulations. So we have time for question. Do you have question for Corey? Sorry, I'm not able to see if there is someone.
There's the one hand.
Yeah. Yes, because there is the light. Should have sunglasses.
Yeah, it's right in the
Hi.
Can you rise?
Yes.
Stand up, sorry, and introduce yourself.
Yes. Hi, my name is Alma Thiesmeier, and I work in the AgroMix project, mostly on economic performance of agroforestry. And I was wondering, the project you mentioned, where there is truffles, timber, chicken, hay, and hazelnut, do they all coexist on the same plot at the same time? Or is this more on a farm level, and how does it work? Because this seems to be such an extremely complex system, and yeah, how applicable this would be for a regular farmer to switch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's of course part of the big part of the question is the management side of the thing. Is this something that's manageable? The hay would be phased out as trees got bigger in the systems where there's hay, and the chickens become less important in the systems where there are chickens. But generally, the truffle, hazelnut, and timber, where those are part of the system, those remain in the system. This is a 30-year model, 30-year plan. So they're all managed together, and it should be according to, we did work, as I said, an iterative process to interview farmers, to talk to experts, and it should be manageable on this plot of land to have all those things integrated together. Yeah.
We have
another question.
Another question? There is time.
Can I just follow up on that? Is that actually happening, or is it just a model?
Well, they haven't yet started, but these are people we're working with. They're going to integrate this stuff. Yeah. So it's going to be in reality. Yeah.
Sorry, there is another question up there. Yes.
Hi.
Can you stand up?
Yes, I'm Esteban from the University of Freiburg, and I work in a carbon dioxide removal policy and ethics project that's just started. I would like to know, I worked in the motivation of farmers to adopt or non-adopt agroforestry systems. And when you put in the slide that it's the net present value, Is that the only motivation that would drive the farmer to decide whether he wants to adopt this more complex systems, or are there other underlying factors that would drive that?
Yeah. So if the model's been well formulated and the net present value represents the values of the decision maker who's helped us to develop it, then yes, then we would assume that based on the net present value, the logical choice would be to choose the one with the better net present value outcome. Yeah. Is that answering your question?
Another more question?
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation. Your presentation is really a call for transdisciplinary research. So one thing is to try to achieve that in research, which can be a challenge already, but
Yeah.
that's one step. The next thing is when it comes to policy, in fact, we see that policy domains are often very specific and far from being transdisciplinary. Would you have any suggestion on how to deal with that, or any recommendation towards policy actors?
I mean, I think involving farmers, certainly, but I think one of the mistakes we make as a research community, maybe just a little bit more philosophical here, but I think we often expect policymakers to come to us and ask us for advice, or ask us for what we think about these things. I don't know. I think we need to formulate things in a way that involves policymakers, maybe thinks initially about policies that the work might affect, and works with decision makers and policymakers in the formulation of that's part of this transdisciplinary approach, is formulating research with those kinds of things in mind, with those decision makers and stakeholders in mind. So maybe that's part of the solution.
Okay, thank you. I think it's time gone, so thank you very much. And now is the turn of the second speaker.